Hello and welcome to my tutorial. Mr.net is here, and today I'm going to talk about the mock object and the functions what we can use to compare our unit test results. In the previous video I spoke about the arguments which we can use to create instances of mock objects. And today I'm going to evaluate with the assertions my mock object. To explain the assertions, I create a script, and this script contains two functions and one global variable. The function 1 and the global variable are mock objects. Only this function isn't a mock object. So in my test I called the main function this, which calls the mock object. And the first assertion what I used is the assert not called function. This function allows us to check if a function or a mock object is not called in a unit test. We see that the value global, this value here, is a mock object and it isn't called to this time. So this test will be okay. If I use the assert not call on the function 1 mock object, which is called in this method, we will see that the test fails. Yes, because the function 1 is called 1 times. The other function is assert called, which asks is if a mock object is called 1 or more times. So the function 1 is called once. So this test will be okay. If I ask if the global value are called, this test will be also failed. Yes, the value global have to be called, but it isn't called. The function assert called once is true when the function is only called once. If I ask to this time whether the value global is called once, this test will fail because it isn't called. This is also when I call my main function, which called the mock object function 1, and I start the test. I get also a failure because this function is called 2 times. The next function is the assertion that allows us to ask which arguments are used to call this mock object. Important is that only the last call will be checked. So the function 1 is called with the argument none. This is because this function has a default argument which has the value none. So if I start here the test, it works fine. Now I call here the mock object value global, and I also call the mock object value global with an argument. I can use the method assert called with, but the problem is that the last call contains this argument, so this method, this test will fail. Because the value global called with the argument. I can use this assertion for the last argument like this, and now if I start the test, it works. The next method, assert called once with, checks if a mock object is called only once with a specific argument. The assert any call function is used to ask when I call a mock object more with different arguments, and the order of the call can be anywhere, can be anything. So I see that the function 1 is called with new argument, and I can use the assert any call function to ask if the mock object function 1 is called with this argument. When I try to ask assert has calls, I can use this method to ask in which order is the mock object called. When I call here the mock object with new argument, and I use the default argument any order as false, so it is important that the first call is on the left side in the list and the last call is on the right side. If I change this order of the call objects here, then this test will fail. If I use the any order argument true, so I can check if the arguments are used, but the order can be different. For example, if I take this argument here and try to ask if the mock object is called first with this argument and then with this argument, we will see that the test will fail. Yes, this is expected. Call new argument and the call none. And this is the actual order. The first call was with none argument, and the second call was with new argument. So these methods were the assertions. I can use a method called reset_mock to reverse all calls. So if I try, or if I use on the function 1 mock object the reset_mock function, the assertion tells me that this mock object isn't called because I delete every calls. these parameters here can be used to reset the return value and the side effects. The default is false, so if I reset the mock, the return value and the side effect stays clear. The next methods, what I want to show, are these three methods. For example, you can create an instance of a mock object, and after you create it, you can modify the mock object. The first method is the mock add spec method. This method allows us to modify a mock object that is created and set to the mock object a specification like this parameter here, what I show in previous videos. I can choose the spec underline set argument like this argument, or I can use the simple spec argument. For example, I create here a mock object, what is an instance of a string, and I also can create an empty mock object without this argument, so I can use the mock add spec method to set the specification. So the mock object number 2 is now the same like the mock object here. Only the instance is the same. These objects are different, but the instance is the same. The next method is the attach mock. This method allows me to add to an instance of a mock a child mock. So I can add to the function 1 a new mock, this mock object here, and give to the mock object the name. The attribute is the name of the child mock. And the last modification method here is the configure mock. We see that when we create a mock instance, we can use here also a key value argument, that's a dictionary. But I can use also the configure mock method. This method allows that I can create a dictionary like this here, and I can use this dictionary to create an instance of the mock. So if I start to debug this test, oh sorry, I forgot to save. I start to debug this test. Now I see that the mock object has a property value 1 with the number 10, which is the first key value pair in the dictionary. So for that I can use the configure mock method. The last properties what I want to show are this section here, the call variable and the call count variable. The called variable is only a boolean which tell me if a mock object is called, and the call count tells me how often a mock object is called in the unit test. Called and amount of calls. So if I start to debug here, function 1 is not defined. Oh, sorry. Second chance. Yes. So the boolean tells me that the function is called and the amount of calls is 1. This is in this function. I can also ask to get a list of all arguments which are used to call the mock object. So for that I can use the call argument property or the call argument list. Now is, oh sorry, I forgot to uncomment this section. It's a little bit late in the night for me, but I try to give my best. So now this function is called with none, and this property returns me a list with all calls. And the last properties are the method calls and the mock calls. These two properties are different because the mock call tells me the number, how often the the mock object is called, and this property tells me how often a method in this mock object is called. So I also here start my debugger to show you the difference. So we see the list with method calls are 0 because I didn't call a method in this function. The mock calls are 1. This is this call here in this function. So I can specify a new mock in function is a new mock object, and this mock object, or I add the mock object with the attach mock method to my function mock object, new mock. now I can call mock in function. So what I do is I call this mock object inside my function1 mock object. And now we see that I have a method call mock in function, and the number of total calls are increased by 1 because every method call is also a call on the parent mock object. So that was the mock class, the arguments to create an instance, and some methods to use it in the unit tests. In the next videos I tell you more about the unit test mock library. So if you like this video, please give me a feedback or a recommendation and subscribe my channel. Hopefully I see you in the next video. Bye.